Mr. Firdaus, I'll go to you next. Like we heard, there's interest from foreign energy companies, which is great. I would guess there's an oil barrel or two behind that money. Most financing in the region, however, does come from non-private sources. There's regulatory and financial market frameworks that are cited really as limiting appetite for private investors so far. What can policymakers do in the region to enhance the role of private finance or blended finance or development financial, any kind of finance that's non-governmental? And how do you think this will help to speed up the renewable deployment story in the region?
Okay, thank you very much, David, for setting the scene. And I also think that we should also say thanks to both MCs for providing the scene setting as well. It was as somber and as a underwhelming introduction to renewables that I have, come across. But I think this is an opportunity for us to recalibrate and realign how we think and gauge the appetite is among private investors, DFIs, private funds, equity, all financial institutions towards the renewable energy prospects in Southeast Asia. Coming from the Brunei Economic Development Board, as also coming from a small country where our renewable energy industry is relatively nascent, and where the business ecosystem and the environment in terms of the sectoral policies, in terms of the incentive structures, etc., are still work in progress. Nonetheless, we still receive quite decent, significant interest from investors coming to us, knocking on our doors, proposing to pursue renewable energy projects in Brunei. And so investor interest in Brunei, renewable energy, is such that have to be, upfront, that we have also it has prompted us to adapt. We have changed our organization in the sense that we have dedicated units now to talk about renewable energy with investors. And our colleagues in the regulatory side are also adapting similarly. There are more dialogue and interactions between regulators and the industry so that we can understand each other better and work towards our net zero journey. And also, allow me to digress a little bit. When we look at our neighbors, we are really happy to see that some of the biggest RE projects in the world are happening in the region. I can perhaps, if you allow me to cite, perhaps the 3.5 gigawatt solar project between Singapore and Indonesia, and the 3.5 gigawatt offshore wind farm in Vietnam Binh Thuan region. So what we're saying is that, it is important that we be a bit more positive in setting the premise of the discussion. Now, having said that, of course, there's a lot of ground to cover, as you and the MCs have cited. And I would like to make some reference to a finding by IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, in that in the next 3 decades, the ASEAN region will triple its total final energy consumption, TFEC, by 3 times, and the electricity demand for the region by 2030 will increase up to 5 times. And this is happening at a time when our sources of fossil fuels are shrinking, and we probably will need to import these sources of fuel. So there's massive money that needs to be flown into renewable energy, and I would be remiss to say that public finance alone will not be sufficient to cover all this, but it should be enough to tell investors what's on the table, what assets can we play with, what assets and what projects are there for the private sector to bid for. Now, second suggestion that I would like to make is that in line with all these national plans, the policymakers need to create conducive conditions for investors, for private investors to come in. Like in any sector, and now, especially in renewable, at the core of the financing is the question of risk. Who is taking risk upfront, private sector or the government? And so it is well and good. So it is well and good that so we have all these structures, but really investors need certainty, and investors need to have clarity on what they are investing in. And so what is important is to have policies that are that will incentivize renewable energy investments such as tax credits, subsidies, feed-in tariffs, etc. But what's really important for all these policies is that they need to be clear and they need to be predictable. I think one way, one structure that most countries that successfully have implemented these things are in the form of long-term power purchase agreements, PPAs. And that's one model that I think has been adapted by a few of my colleagues here around the table. Perhaps a last point I'd like to make in terms of what policymakers can do to improve it is to improve and streamline the regulatory process. It's all these simplifying the project approval process every step of the way. So, from the project inception, the design, the fundraising, the EIA process, construction, and so on. It will be very helpful to have a one-stop agency that can take care of the investor, and that is the only agency that is in contact, that is someone that can be the relationship manager for the investor. And so I think I'd like to end there. Of course, plenty more that we can talk about.